Let's call to order the Village of Riverside, Illinois Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting and public hearing for Wednesday, July 25th, 2018. Director App, would you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Chairperson Mateo?
I am here.
Commissioner Scanlon?
Here.
Commissioner Hannon?
Here.
Commissioner Mendoza?
Here.
Commissioner Miller?
Here.
Commissioner Pelletier?
Here.
Absent is Commissioner Marhoul, but we do have a quorum.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting minutes, of June 27th, 2018?
So moved.
Second? Second. So I pointed out one edit for Director App, so with that one edit, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, so that passes. Our village trustee liaison is not here. Do you have anything from the village board to update us on?
We had the text amendment on the village board agenda last week. However, Trustee Lumsden asked for some additional time to review it, so it was continued to the September 6th meeting for him to be able to review it. We have kind of some heavy August agendas, so it's asked for that additional time. So they will be revisiting it in September, and one of the things he said was his concern was how it makes driveways, existing two-car or more garages, or driveways, non-conforming. They're attached. So, so he kind of wanted to look through the code, work through that, and have some questions for staff, I think. So we'll be working through that, and I'll obviously update you on their discussion that they have when they talk about it in September. And I believe that's all I have for a board update.
Okay. Thank you. So then I'll go ahead and call to order the public hearing, PZ 18-03. All members are still present. All in favor? Aye. Okay. So with your indulgence, as Commissioner Marhoul arrives, I'll summarize the public notice and enter it into the record as an exhibit. It was published July 13th. PZ 18-03 is an application from the petitioner, professional permits, on behalf of the business owner, Amita Health Medical Group, for sign variations from Section 4.3.14b in Table 2 of the Village's sign regulations within Chapter 4-3 of the Riverside Village Code, also known as the Sign Code, for property located at 105 East Burlington Street in Riverside. The variations sought are to allow 64.3 square feet in total wall sign area as opposed to the 40 square feet allowed by the sign code, and to locate wall signs on walls facing the parking lot and facing the railroad tracks rather than on the wall facing the street as authorized by the sign code. Our petitioner is Mr. Gary Potts. So with that, would you stand and raise your right hand and be sworn in?
Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
Thank you.
Director App, will you provide a summary, please?
Yes, so this property is zoned B1TC, which is transitional commercial. It's located just west of the intersection of Cowley and Burlington. Amita Health currently occupies Unit C of the building, which is located at the south end of the building. So they are an end unit, so they face the parking lot and the railroad tracks, I guess, for their two frontages, so to speak. They are seeking to erect two internally illuminated wall signs on those building walls. However, those building walls are not authorized by our sign code to have wall signs. In addition, the two signs together, the square footage added together exceeds their total allotment of wall signage that they would be permitted. So those are the two variations that are needed. The unit has 40 feet of frontage facing the parking lot. So that would give them their unit width, they get 1 for 1. So that would give them 40 square feet of wall signage per our code. Their one sign that they're proposing on that west wall that would face the parking lot is under the 40 square feet. It's 34.72 square feet based on using our new sign area computation measurements that we came up with our sign code update a few years back. So that allows you to kind of break it up into components as opposed to just creating like one giant rectangle to encompass the sign. So the way they had calculated it was the old big Rectangle Way, using the new method, it gets them to 34.72 square feet, which does meet the 40 square foot requirement. However, when you add in the 18.2 square foot box sign that they're proposing on that south wall, then it brings them to 54, I believe. Sorry, 52.92 square feet. So then it puts them over their 40 square foot maximum. As I said, their building has units that go the entire way back, that their access entrances are off that parking lot, so their facades don't face a public street, and so therefore they're not permitted to have a wall sign on them based on our B1 regulations. So again, that requires that variation that they need in order to have that wall sign on that wall facing the parking lot, in addition to have that wall sign on the wall that faces the railroad tracks, which also has some additional parking back there. Let's see. The sign regulations allow for variations, and that has, the sign code has set out certain regulations or standards for a sign variance. So you do have those standards listed in your staff report. They are different than the standards for a zoning variation. So just calling that to your attention. And so you're supposed to use these standards as you think through this. It says it's recognized that the regulations provided in the sign code cannot, in each and every case, sensitively handle all of the sign situations that may arise within the unique range of properties found in the village. Therefore, sign variations may be requested pursuant to the procedures and requirements outlined in the code. So notification was given to the immediately adjacent neighbors, as well as to the other tenants in the building, and we're having our hearing. Petitioner is here to answer any questions that you have. You do have pictures of the sign, signs that are proposed. The one sign is an individual channel letter sign that's internally illuminated. That's the one that would be facing the parking lot and be on their front facade, so to speak. The other one is a box sign, and that would be the one that would be located on the side of the building facing the railroad tracks.
And still no input from neighbors?
I have not heard anything from any of the neighbors.
Okay. Mr. Potts, your presentation, please.
Good evening. My name is Gary Potts, and I am the owner of Professional Permits. Our offices are located at 58171 Dragonfly Court in Osceola, Indiana. I'm here tonight representing G&D, Georgopoulos, and Amita Healthcare Medical Group. Amita Health Medical Group requests relief from municipal zoning ordinance where wall signs cannot exceed a 1 square foot per linear foot of building frontage. Amita Health Medical Group occupies Suite C, as she said, with a 40-foot linear frontage, thus limiting the total square footage to 40 square feet. She stated as well that we are requesting the 2 signs. Sign 1, the dimensions again are 34.72 square feet and will be installed at the suite entrance. And sign 2 is on the rear of the rear elevation of the building, which will face the railroad tracks. Sign 2 will provide wayfinding for southbound motorists on Cowley Road. The suites of the building are positioned so that the entrances do not face a public street, and as such allows for limited wayfinding for motorists. We believe that this request is a minimum relief necessary to allow for safe motorist wayfinding. We thank you for the time you've taken to review this application, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have at this time.
Questions for Mr. Potts?
Could you expound on the back of the building sign? I guess is the sole purpose for that is the just wayfinding?
Yes.
From the south coming up from Cowley?
Exactly, because we're so limited with our signage on the main drive, we thought that a sign in the rear elevation would allow some additional exposure for the office as for the traffic
Right,
on Cowley.
but the sign is going to be right in front, not the back sign towards the railroad track. The other sign is going to be over the actual entrance to the office space?
Yes, sir. Sign 1 will be over the entrance. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, so you're here tonight representing the owner of the building, is that right?
I'm here representing the owner of the building and the tenant as well.
And the tenant, okay. And so so there are other tenants in that building?
That's correct.
So what are the plans for additional signage for those other two tenants?
At this time, I've not been made aware that there are any plans for any additional signs for those tenants.
And in terms of Amita, you're representing this particular medical group? So are you aware of plans for the other doctor's offices also in the Amita group along Burlington for them to also have additional signage along the tracks?
I have not been made privy to any of that information yet. If they are going to do that, if that's in the plans, I simply do not know. I'm sorry.
Hi. Was there any consideration given to signs that are not internally illuminated? I think that's the phrase. Like either signs that were just flat, or ones that have like lighting from the gooseneck lighting or something like that for either of the signs? As opposed to the internally illuminated.
Right. I don't know if there was other illumination options considered. I do know that actually gooseneck provides more light spillover than the internal illuminated. These are LED fixtures, and they will only provide enough illumination to basically to set them off against the wall.
And I was trying to find in here, I think, Sonia, there's a limitation on how long those signs could be, they have to be turned off at midnight, is that right?
I believe so.
Okay.
It's either 11 o'clock or midnight.
Do you know what the intent is as far as the hours that the signs will be illuminated? Will it only be during office hours, or will it be
It will probably,
whatever is required?
I don't know for sure, but they're going to follow the ordinance at the very minimum.
Right, I just wondered if they'd be turned off. Like, obviously, restaurants and places like that, I think, tend to turn off their lights when they're closed so people don't come in. I was just wondering what the thought was on that.
As you're speaking, I'm looking at the artwork and seeing if there's a photo cell or if there's just a switch.
I only saw a switch.
I didn't see a photo.
I didn't look
There's
at
an
it.
internal switch to service the sign. But that's certainly something we could consider.
Okay. One other consideration, or a question I had was the particular sizes, how were these two sizes chosen? Do you know?
They have a family, they have a sign family that they kind of follow based upon what's allowed and what is going to be ideal for a particular suite, setback from the road, visibility, that sort of thing. They take into consideration.
Sorry, who's the they?
Amita and Icon, who is Amita's sign company.
So you're thinking they have certain standards like setback distance, other location of the sign, whatever it is, and then they choose a size.
Correct.
I have a question, and I don't know if it's for you or maybe for you, Sonia. Is the property owner a necessary party for this variation request?
Yes, I believe the code requires that the property owner at least acknowledge that they've authorized them to move forward with the variation.
Okay, and the reason I'm asking, I'm trying to figure out who the real party in interest is here, because I may have a conflict, given I have all my insurance needs satisfied by the property owner. So that's, yeah, I think you answered my question.
Oh, since you do represent the owner, I noticed that this State Farm sign on the back of the building, it looks like it's an illuminated sign, but I went by there last night with my dog and I noticed that it wasn't lit up. So do you happen to know anything about that sign, or if you're planning on turning that on?
I do not. I don't know how long the sign has been up, other than I have the artwork the same as you, and I noticed that it was there. Their sign was there, and then Amita wanted to put a sign up there as well and replace that light. So if it's not illuminated now, I don't know if it just needs service or if they
But
have
it looks
to turn
like
off
an
for a reason.
illuminated sign, right? It looks
I think
like
so.
an internally illuminated.
Yes.
Okay.
That's definitely. Well, it's kind of hard to tell from my picture, but
It looks like
I would
it's an
assume it is.
illumination.
It's a cabinet sign, so there's got to be some sort of illumination in there, whether or not it's activated.
Okay.
If they were going to go with something non-illuminated, they probably, to save money, would just go with a flat piece of
Right.
aluminum or Lexan against the wall.
Okay, thank you.
So I just want to confirm, I understand your response to Commissioner Miller concerning the times that the sign will be lit. So you're not aware at this point whether it's only going to be lit during the hours that the office is open, or if you're looking to keep it lit the whole time that the ordinance would allow? Because the office isn't really open late.
Correct.
Most days. So I'm just wondering, if in fact the signs are for wayfaring, then I assume that they'll be shut off as soon as the office is closed for the day.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that question. If that were to be made a condition of the approval, then I can certainly take that back to them.
Do you know if the request for the signage on the south side of the building was the result of an express need from patients, difficulty finding the location, or was it more of a reaction to the existing sign for the other tenant that's there?
I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I didn't ask if they're getting feedback from people looking for it as to why they want that. I can certainly see, as people are traveling, that sign would be helpful for those that are looking for the office before they come to that intersection and decide they need to turn left. But I do not have any feedback that I can share that says whether or not they are having problems finding it.
Dr. Abb, how long has there been medical practice there?
15 years? There's been a medical practice in that unit. Riverside, it was Riverside Family for many, many years, and then it turned over to a new medical group. And so Amita's been in there for at least
20 years.
I mean, there's been a family medicine in that unit for, a very long time.
Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Potts?
I have a question for Sonia, I think. The building itself, is it anywhere near its limit for signage, that property?
No. So it's got fairly limited signage out there because it just has the ground sign, and then you just have the State Farm signs, and then the other ones are just small window signs that the dentist have and the other design group has. So the signage out there is pretty minimal.
Is that existing south sign non-conforming?
Yes.
I'm sorry, the
It was
existing,
non-conforming.
The State
existing
Farm sign, I have no record of a
On the
of a
rear
permit
elevation?
for that one, so.
So it's non-conforming because you don't have a permit for it?
Well,
or-
the code doesn't allow for it, and I have no record of there being a sign variance or a building permit for it. So even if I did have a building permit for it, I think, given whatever sign code changes may have happened since that sign was put in, it would be non-conforming, but
Okay.
I couldn't find any records of a sign variance or anything for allowing that sign on the rear, so.
If I could just want to get some clarification. I'm looking at this first picture in the package. I'm assuming this came from Amita. That has
Just a cover page.
Yeah, but this first picture has the 4 signs. I just want to make sure I understand. It says sign 1, 2, 3, 4. So
3 and 4 are window vinyl and door vinyl.
No, sign 3 is the ground sign, so there'll be,
okay, that was
so that'll be
confusing.
their little tenant panel on the ground sign.
Right.
And sign 4 is their windows, replacement of the window sign.
Right.
What sign 1 then?
Sign 1, it would be the individual channel letter sign that's going over the entrance. So it's the wall sign that they're
Okay,
asking.
and then
the
sign
variance.
2 is the one that's the proposed one that's facing the railroad tracks.
Correct.
And just I assume the answer is yes, there's no other signs on that railroad side of the building yet.
There is a State Farm sign facing the railroad.
Got it, okay. That clarifies, thank you. And we're saying that that's the one that's not conforming?
We believe that one's not conforming.
One last question.
Sure.
For Mr. Ross. So this first page says Amita Health, but all your signs say Amita Health Medical Group. The ground sign says Amita Health. I'm just wondering if they might consider just having Amita Health to
Got it.
minimize the sign size.
They have Amita Health Medical Group, and they have Amita Health. They also have different types of practices, so they might have, and they use that bottom portion to explain whether it's a doctor's office or whether it's a hospital facility or if it's some sort of an urgent care. So it would say Amita Health Urgent Care, Amita Health Immediate Care. So this happens to just be a medical group of doctors that's in this office.
Okay.
So I'm having difficulty seeing what the hardship is here,
Okay.
our first standard. So what are the unique circumstances or unusual conditions that apply here? I've read your answer that it's for Wayfind, but I don't see how those are unique circumstances or unusual conditions. Every business wants their customers to find them.
Right, but most offices have some sort of a frontage that faces a public street, and in this particular instance, the entrance to the facility and basically any signage that they have, with the exception of that small monument sign, is only facing the parking lot. So unless you're coming, if my direction's right, east, you're not going to see it because it's on the other side of the building. If you're heading west, you're only going to see it basically when you're in the, right there when you're just about to turn in. So that's what we believe it's for, is because it's a unique instance where the suites don't face a frontage. Most buildings anymore, when they build them, they have them so that their suite entrances do face some sort of a public road. And these just happen to not do that. So we feel that that qualifies as a hardship due to lack of visibility for the suite.
And based on the size of the proposed sign facing the parking lot, you think people will see that before they turn into the parking lot? With
We
the
do.
trees and with, if they're coming eastbound, as you said, they're not going to see it.
Correct. If they're traveling, obviously it's on the one side of the building, so.
But there are large trees on the east side of the, west side of the parking lot.
West side, yeah, if we're talking about the right side, yes. Yeah, I think with it being there, I do believe that you're going to get some visibility earlier on than if you have a smaller sign that's going to be on that elevation.
And what about the rear one? So if I'm coming over the railroad tracks, I'm not sure I'm going to avert my eyes and see that sign somewhere on the back of the building.
Well, signs are meant to be read kind of from a distance. So as the closer you get to that railroad track and the intersection where that opens up there, you're going to see it further off, further back, so then you can make your decision on when you're going to turn and if that's what you want to do, or if you're looking for the office, or if you aren't, you'll just continue on. If the sign is not there, then you basically have to know to turn left. You have to know the directions for the office versus just having some visibility and saying, oh, there's Amita Health right there.
What percentage of the clients at that practice are walk-in clients who just are wandering by and see that there's an Amita Health Group and wander in to get service?
I don't know the answer to that question. I honestly, I don't know how many. I can't even answer that, or even fathom, I guess.
I don't think, because I would think that that would be the primary concern, would be people who aren't purposefully going to the office. Because if you're purposefully going, even if you drive by and say, oh, there it went, you turn around and just come back. So the additional signage would just prevent people from maybe driving a half block further and then, you know, turning around in a driveway and coming back. Because if you're going there on purpose, you're gonna find it.
And I guess, just to latch on, that's where my confusion lies, is that the address is on Burlington Street. It's not as if, so you're going to be looking for Burlington Street and be able to, if you turn left or right, you're going to be able to figure it out just by looking at addresses. So I guess share, not quite understanding where the hardship arises in this, if there's a sign over the door to the entrance of the office building, that's the door you use. I don't understand the purpose of the railroad-facing sign when the address of the building is the front of the building and on a major street in downtown Riverside.
Well, I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know that there is anything that allows for signage on the front of that. And I believe that might be somebody else's suite.
Right, it is somebody else's suite.
Yep, there's
in the
monument
front.
signage.
But there is the monument.
So there's the address plus monument signage.
Mhm.
Right, okay.
And projecting signs couldn't work? If the owner agreed?
I believe you're only allowed one projecting sign. I mean, so they could presumably put one projecting sign on Burlington specifically for Amita if they wanted to. A blade sign, like we have in the downtown, they do allow those, but you're only allowed one per zoning lot in the B1 district versus one per business. It just reads a little different in the B1 district, so.
So one for the whole building. So if Anita got it, then the other tenants, the other 3 tenants wouldn't be able to have one.
Exactly.
And you can't list multiple businesses.
I don't think the
Blades
size
are-
restrictions would accommodate that, no.
Right, okay. And it'd probably be too small to see it anyways.
If they did, yeah.
Okay.
Another question you might
Yes.
not be able to answer.
I'll try.
It appears that the same doctors are in the practice. Any idea what percentage of the patients are returning patients and already know where to go?
No, I'm sorry, I don't. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Commissioner Marvel, you're being very quiet tonight.
I'm simply struggling between the need for a business to advertise and how much of that we want to allow. I'm going to state that even though you have not, that the railroad sign seems to be more of an advertisement than an attempt to provide better navigation.
Well, any more questions for Mr. Potts? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ray, did you have any? Okay. All right, questions for Director App?
Sonia, has the staff looked to see if every tenant in the building had the same amount of signage that Amita is requesting, would they then exceed the amount for the building?
Yes. Because the building is not as wide as it is long, so.
And the decals in the window that they're asking for, that's to code,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
It's already there.
Yeah, and the change, well, they wanted to change it, but.
They want to
that
add a
was-
little bit more to it with the
Yeah.
hours and stuff, but yeah, it all meets.
Seemed like that was okay, and just changing at the street was okay, it just happened because they just requested it all together.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
just so you can see the full package.
Right.
And not think that something was missing, but there's no variation required for the window sign or the monument sign lettering that they want to add. The only variance needed is for the wall signage that they are requesting.
Okay, thank you.
Sonia, the overall limitation you're talking about, is that in the table?
Yes.
Where it says a maximum of 100 square feet for wall signs? Table 2?
So
Hadn't
their
thought about
overall
that.
maximum, sorry, let me
That's for,
get my table.
That,
So it's at the very top where it says, total combined sign area shall not exceed 2 square feet per lineal foot of zoning lot frontage. So that's the total combined sign area for the site.
okay.
So that's a maximum allotment of all signage on that site. So each unit's wall signs, window sign, the directory monument sign, that in totality can't exceed the 2 square feet per lineal feet of the zoning lot width.
And in this instance?
They're not at that number yet.
Well, what is it though? Like is,
Um,
Commissioner Scanlon was saying is,
I
do you happen to
forget.
know?
So I believe they were at 200 square feet.
Okay. Well, if that's true, they're not so far off then, since there's State Farm and 3 tenants, right?
Right.
So,
They're fairly small signs, and some of the signage, like for the dentist and stuff, does not technically count towards that because it's just considered hours of operation, so you don't include that
Right.
part of the signage in it, so.
but I think I was thinking the same as many other commissioners, which is
If the others start
if
wanting
the other
this-
tenants, especially there's some kind of a design group there, I don't know what they design, but they might very well say, well, we want our, sign, so
there's not
it seemed to be a matter of fairness, but.
there's not room for another 40 square feet at the dentist's office and another 40 square feet at the designer's office.
And I guess my concern, and we've had this discussion in several contexts, is, there tries to be a uniformity in the variances that we grant. So I'm struggling with what makes this property unique to the other businesses that face the railroad tracks. And if they came in with a sign variance and we were to grant this one, what would our rationale for denying that? And I think the goal of the guidance that we have is that we don't want a stream of signs going down the railroad tracks as the commuters go by. And we want to keep that a clean back of the building with whatever signage needs to be had is at the front of the buildings facing the streets. And I'm struggling, and I don't know if anyone else is struggling with, what do we say to the next person that comes in with, you can't see us from coming from the other side.
Right. To clarify, though, we did amend the central business district, so the B2 sign code was amended to allow those businesses that back up to the railroad tracks to be able to have a sign on the back of the building.
In B2.
In the B2.
Right.
So I don't think that was necessarily thought as much for the B1, since there's just not as much of the B1 that's along the railroad tracks. But you're primarily focusing at that time on the central business district, and one of the CMAP recommendations was to allow signage on the rear of the buildings to take advantage of the railroad metro line.
That's helpful.
And Director Epp, just repeating what you already said. You didn't receive any feedback from the other tenants in the building, because all of them received a notice, right? But none of them had any
None of them.
comments on
No,
this,
they did
pro
not.
or con.
Or the house next door.
Did not hear anything from the house next door either.
So, and my view of it is, personally, I kind of thought it would be a good idea to have some kind of signage along the railroad to show that there are businesses in these buildings. So I didn't think that was necessarily a bad thing. I think the sign in the front of the suite is, to me, looking at the picture, aesthetically too big. And one of the criteria is looking at the size of signs. It just looks like it's too big for the space. I think that could be shrunk. I think the box sign on the back could be shrunk so we could get a lot closer to the limitation of 40 square feet. And I don't think that would... I agree that I don't think the one in the back is really for wayfinding. I think it's more for for advertising, which I don't think is a bad thing. But in this day and age with smartphones and all the rest, people are not going to be driving down Cowley looking for, oh, where's Burlington? Where's the Amita Health Office? I don't think for wayfinding that's really practical. So I don't think that we need to approve a maximizing of the size of that box sign in the back.
Am I allowed to comment? Okay. I was just going to say, I came here, this is my first time here to this town hall, and I used Google Maps, and I missed it. I drove completely around the other side and had to go, because it was too late, and I said, turn here, and I was watching for pedestrians, make sure at the crosswalk, and I went all the way around the block and had to come back. So I use Google Maps all the time, and because I'm traveling all over the country constantly, and I missed it. So wasn't the end of the world that I'd go back and went back around, but I allowed enough time to be here on time. However, if you are pressed or you're stressed, and going to a doctor's office is not always a pleasant experience, quite honestly. So you're already under that pressure, especially if it's your first time. You're not familiar with the doctor, you're not familiar with the office and the practices. I just think that this does actually help motorists. That's just my 2 cents.
And the pedestrians, thank you for not running them over.
I'm sorry?
The pedestrians, thank you
Yes.
for paying attention to
I'm
them.
sure they do.
It's a tough location out there. Other questions for Director App? Final statement?
I think we'd love to have what we were asking for. We feel it's the minimum relief. I kind of feel that maybe some members of the board don't agree with us as far as the size of the sign on the wall elevation facing over the entrance. So they do have a smaller size sign in the package in their family. If the board is more comfortable with something a little bit smaller, I can certainly take that back to them. I don't know what that is off the top of my head, which I should, but I don't. And we may be close, because we're at roughly 53 square feet, in order to get it to the 40, as far as meeting what we need for a 1-for-1. Probably the next size down would allow for that to be around 40 square feet. So we're certainly open to that option as well.
Okay. Somebody make a motion to either continue or close the public hearing?
I move to close the public hearing.
All in favor? Okay. All right. Let's have a discussion. Some thoughts have already been presented, but Ed looks like he has something to say.
I guess I'm just struggling that, wall signs are allowed, or rear-facing signs are allowed in a different zone. So to me, I'm struggling, is this a variance, or is this more of a opportunity to suggest to the trustees to rethink whether that permitted zone gets brought down further to cover more businesses as those continue to grow towards Harlem Avenue?
Well, we can certainly make that as part of your recommendation, that if you feel it's appropriate for businesses in the B1 to be able, that do have frontage facing the railroad tracks, to be able to have signage facing those, you can certainly make that as part of your statement or with your recommendations, so that they're aware of it. I think one of the things we did, like when we had the canopy sign for the, was it the Citgo? That we did the variance for them to be able to have the canopy sign, and then moved forward at the board's recommendation to do a text amendment to make it so that other gas stations would be allowed to have the canopy sign. So, that's another route that we could take as well. So we would wouldn't hold them up from being able to obtain their permit until the text amendment goes through, but would allow for the variance and then would come back and start moving forward with the text amendment.
And I guess that gives me some comfort. I'm just concerned about the precedent in finding a hardship of finding a place in Riverside to give rear-facing signs. And the example that comes up to my mind is La Barra. So people can't find them on the corner when they're coming down Long Common. You know, should they get a big sign on the back of that condo building so you can see it coming from the north? I mean, to me, I think the answer is no, that's not what we want. I think the unique nature here is that this rear of the building is facing the railroad tracks. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if we're going to allow advertisement towards the railroad tracks for tenants in some portion, but not all, you know, I can't get my arms around hardship because it's not limited to railroad tracks, but if there's a text amendment that allowed that, you know, I would feel comfortable in supporting that text amendment.
I guess the other thing I would say, just to temper that, is I think in thinking about it, in the central business district, you primarily have businesses or mixed uses flanking the railroad on either side, whereas in this area, you don't have a business on the other side of the railroad tracks. You do have residences. So, you know, there is that to consider. If we do go the text amendment route, then anybody would be able to have this. Then you perhaps have some areas there where it's residential across the railroad tracks on Quincy, even though it's businesses on the north side of the tracks along Burlington in some instances.
If I lived on Quincy, I would not want to be looking at signs, personally. I mean,
You know,
I'm
in the
all
central
for-
business district, you know, you don't have necessarily that
Got it.
same residential use on the other side.
Okay.
So, where are there businesses, you're saying on Burlington, that back up to Quincy or have their backs facing Quincy, where Quincy's residential? Which are, do you know of any?
So like this area right here,
Right.
it's residences on the other
Right,
side.
but that's the only one I know of.
Further down
So
Burlington.
further down Burlington.
There's a couple medical office buildings similar to this, but don't those kind of not really face residences? Don't there, isn't there like a wide, because they're pretty close to Harlem, or am I wrong?
So there, I think the medical businesses that are on Burlington closer to Harlem are similar to this one, where
Okay.
they're long. And so it would be a similar situation where, you know, it's a narrower frontage facing the railroad track. So, you know, it'd be a similar thing. There'd be an end unit that maybe would want a sign on that.
No, I agree with that. So that was one of the issues I had
But
thought
there
about
is
as far as
residences
being
that
unique.
across the railroad tracks.
Okay, I didn't remember the
There's, I
residences
think,
across. It seemed more
2.
industrial to me maybe, but maybe, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, because I mean,
Insurance
the businesses on Quincy, you know, there's the alley that kind of goes behind some of the businesses that are on Harlem, and then it's residences the rest of the way.
And then the railroad, okay.
Go coming
all right.
into town on the north side of Quincy.
I do think we have a fairly limited number of buildings. I mean, I think there's only this one and then 2 more where we would, that are out of the business, central business district. So I support the idea of some kind of a text amendment. I had the same idea. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to have a modest advertising sign facing the railroad tracks, with the concern about illumination and disturbing residences. But I have to say, the back of some of those buildings are not very attractive in and of themselves, so having a sign, I don't think really makes any difference looking at the back of those buildings. Unless it was something that was brightly lit, you know, at all hours.
Well, and we do have our illumination requirements, so
Exactly,
they
so
can't
we
be
have
on
that.
overnight, so.
I think Ed has a good point with regards to the precedent, shall we call it, of the different business zoning districts. I'd also like to, and I agree with his thoughts, especially when we start thinking about where the village is trying to go with regards to being somewhat more business friendly. I don't know if the sign necessarily needs to be illuminated. Could it be just a flat sign without illumination and still get that advertising to the commuters? Because that's really what it is when it's facing the railroad tracks. With regards to the sign over the front door, I think I'd like to consider a smaller size if the petitioner is open to that.
I'm sorry, over the front door?
The front door.
But that's.
Well, the one facing the railroad, or the one facing the parking lot.
The
Their
one
unit's
facing
front
the
door.
parking lot over their front door. The one that
thought
Commissioner
that was-
Scanlon was, and Commissioner
Okay,
Miller thought was a little bit oversized for the need,
okay.
which would get us closer to that 40 square foot limitation.
So I think the one thing we haven't considered is because we keep referring to that back sign as being advertisement, is people who are on the train. It is kind of wayfinding for them. I mean, yes, there is Google, but when you're on the train, kind of when you know you have to get off at Riverside and you know you're going to Amita Health, it definitely helps for you to see it as you're going by. Yeah, that's just for the outbound, but, still I think it does provide some wayfinding in that manner. I also agree with Commissioner Miller that if we allow signage along the railroad tracks in B2, I think that we should consider it in B1. I think that aesthetically it doesn't make a significant difference as far as what the residences are looking at from the south side of the tracks or from the other side of the tracks, as the case may be. It also does activate our railroad frontage, which is something that CMAP requested or suggested for our transportation-oriented, planning and design. That being said, I do think that the signs could be reduced in size. So I don't know how we avoid the precedence issue, but still allow
I think what you're
that.
suggesting is that it's not wayfinding from Cowley, it's wayfinding for people on the train.
I mean, it is both, but really, to me, the need is more on the train than Cowley.
I would like to request the petitioner to think about the size of the sign on the back of the building, with the idea that what if all tenants in the building had a sign? And could they think of visually what size the sign should be if the other tenants, whether the existing tenants or someone else that moves in later, were to request a similar sign? And that would, I think, effectively shrink that sign in the back, just because I don't think you could have 4 signs of that size in the back. It would look very busy and not so, whatever.
Were the nearby residents on Quincy notified? They weren't on the addresses we have. I don't know if this is.
No, I think we did the
everybody.
railroad, so, because that was the immediate adjacent property owner.
But further to that, the owner of that house, were they, I didn't see them listed. That house wasn't listed unless it's rented, and were the renters notified?
So I believe they were notified. It might be that it went to the property owner who is, and I believe it is renters in there, if I am recalling correctly, so.
But there was a public notice sign out front of the building, correct?
Right. And the people across the tracks are outside the boundaries for notification.
Right, there's immediate adjacent
Yeah.
neighbors.
Shall we go through the standards? So the first one, the literal interpretation and strict application of the provisions and requirements of this chapter would result in practical difficulties or particular hardships. because of unique circumstances or unusual conditions pertaining to the construction, alteration, maintenance, repair, or remodeling of a specific sign or pertaining to the building or parcel or property in question. What are your thoughts on that one?
For me, I think exists sufficient unusual conditions, given the location of this suite facing the parking lot, that I think that standard is met.
That the monument sign does not take care of?
Yes, I think so.
Others?
I think the hardship is met for an allowance of having a sign on the side of the building, but not for size.
And in your
Necessarily.
opinion, and not for the rear? Or we're not there yet?
Well, yeah, how unique, I guess how unique is that situation? That's not a unusual circumstance, really, to have the frontage on the railroad tracks.
I agree. I think we're talking about two different, right? We're talking about 4314B, which is only having wall signs that face the street, and then we're also talking about the dimensions of the signs.
Right.
So I think for
Right.
4314B, allowing signs on the side of the building and even on the back, I think there's an unusual condition that justifies that. But I agree with Commissioner Pelletier that the size of the signs don't need to be as what is being requested, so that in that respect, the unusual conditions is not met. For the size of the signs.
I can support Commissioner Peltier's and Miller's thoughts on that.
I can as well, the concept of a sign facing the parking lot. Not the size, as we've talked about.
Commissioner Hannon?
In looking at the practical difficulties or particular hardships, one of the unusual conditions or unique circumstances is defined as location of the property. So I think going with a practical difficulties is that, to the extent that people are coming off the train, it gives them direction finding that wouldn't necessarily be necessary in non-railroad facing properties. I don't find the argument of someone coming off Cowley Road needing direction finding as being the precedent, but I find the railroad direction finding a compelling reason. But I agree with seems to be the consensus. I don't see a hardship that gives rise to this size variation.
So you would be in favor of allowing the track-facing sign?
Yes, but not in the size that they're requesting. I agree with.
So you're not okay with the overall square footage of the 53 square feet?
Right.
You would prefer for them to bring the total package down to 40 square feet?
Right, I don't see the hardship or unique situation that would justify that.
Okay.
I'm going to abstain from any further discussion on this particular topic.
Okay. The second standard, the proposed variation will not impair visibility to adjacent properties, create dangerous traffic situations through line-of-sight problems, or otherwise be materially detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to other nearby properties or improvements.
With the fact that there were no comments from the neighbors who were notified, I'd say that has been satisfied. And the fact that it will, I do not believe, I drove past from Cowley onto Burlington and did not see any issues either with regards to dangerous situations.
Might be detrimental to their suite mates if they want wall signs, but they got here first, I guess.
I would argue that the suite mates have been notified and they could have read the proposal on their own.
Yep.
Also, the owner kind of has control of the total signage, and it's really up to the owner if he wants to parse out his kind of allowed signage or not.
Which we
In my
saw-
opinion.
Sorry, not to,
Do we
which we
find-
saw with the dentist office on Long Common in Harlem.
That's true.
Good point. The proposed variation will maintain and/or enhance the historic, if applicable, and architectural character of a site or building. Not applicable?
Not applicable.
The proposed variation will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood and will result in a sign that is harmonious with the character of the applicable zoning district.
I think that's true again with the limitation of, or the consideration of the size of the signs.
Well, I think this gets back to Commissioner Hannon's comment about the precedent that we've already got a, was it B2
B2 does
allows
allow
railroad
the-
signings,
yes.
so.
The unique circumstances or unusual conditions applying to the specific property and sign do not apply generally to other properties and signs in the village.
I would say the side sign does not generally, but the rear sign really does. I mean, there obviously are other buildings in the B1 district that face the railroad that would apply to. So I think therein lies our struggle.
I think to me, this provision doesn't say you have to have a totally unique piece of property. It just says there are unique circumstances. And so there are some other buildings, there's some other medical office suites in those other buildings we discussed that are in a similar situation, but I still think overall, this is unique enough for me to say that E is met.
For Commissioner Miller, for the rear sign as well as the parking lot sign?
Yes, because I don't think there are that many buildings that have any businesses in the B1 TC district that are, I mean, I don't know the entirety of, like, say, down Harlem and everywhere else, if that's true, but if we're just limiting it right now to consideration of the railroad tracks and backing up to the railroad tracks, I think it's true.
Yeah, I struggle with this one,
Yeah.
under the unique circumstances or unusual conditions, and the sign does not apply generally to other properties and signs in the village. And I think what I'm hearing and what I'm struggling with is, we have a finite number of buildings in this area that face the railroad tracks. So that, I guess, is an unusual condition when you compare it to the village as a whole. But when you compare it to other buildings next door that also face the railroad tracks, I mean, this goes towards, this is really solved through a text amendment if that's what they want to do, because there are other buildings in this same zoning area that this is a usual condition. You have a back facing and people coming off the train can't clearly define where they need to walk through by seeing the train pass.
How would you interpret this one? Does it have to apply to the whole village, or does it apply to the district, zoning district?
Well, it's written in the village, so I think in the way it was written, they were looking at the signage in the village in its entirety, so both of the business districts. It's fairly limited what we allow in residential districts. So I would say you have the wording in front of you, and it says in the village. So
So I would say it applies to one sign, but not the other. That's not how our variation is written.
And that's where I'm going as well. But getting back to, the point that I think several of us have mentioned we struggle with is this wayfaring versus marketing and the attempt to be business friendly and bring in business to Riverside. So that's just where I struggle. But in terms of this, reading this to my interpretation, this, I can see this applying to the parking lot sign, but not to the train, not to the one on the tracks.
So how did we handle the situation on the Citgo canopy sign?
What you recommended was that it was understood that you were recommending approval of the sign variation with the understanding that staff would be moving forward with a variation to correct the code to make it so that there would be signage allowed on the canopies, since that wasn't something that was specifically called out in the sign code.
And this, I guess, is a question for the others. This is the discussion in the context of rear facing, not in the context of sign. That's how I'm interpreting this discussion. Is that a correct assumption, that this text amendment would apply only to rear facing, not to size?
Yes.
I just want to make sure there was no ambiguity. Okay.
I would go further and say rear-facing signs along the railroad tracks.
I agree.
Yeah.
The provision that applies to the CBD says, allows wall signs on building frontage facing public street and on building walls facing or exposed to view from a public street or railroad right-of-way. But I would agree with you that it should really, in this instance, just be railroad right-of-way and not, you can see it through a corner, like.
Right.
I prefer that text amendment.
For clarification, the reason we went for the text amendment for the canopies is because we knew we had more gas stations turning over, and so we knew it was coming up again. In this case, we don't necessarily know that somebody else is going to want a rear-facing sign on the tracks. And we know we need to address our B1 sign ordinance at some point. Just putting that out there. So just putting that out there.
We know we need to address it for this purpose or for just in general? It's
Overall,
something that
we need to
the
overhaul
board
it.
knows that it needs to be overhauled. Okay.
So we did the B2, which took a fair amount of time, and B1 has been looming for a while and will need to be done at some point.
Thank you for that clarification.
Well, let's put a question mark on that one and continue on to F. The purpose of the proposed variation is not based exclusively upon a desire to achieve a higher profit from the property. I think exclusively is an important word there in this case because marketing was mentioned as a benefit. So is that standard met in our eyes?
I think it is. I don't think it's the exclusive purpose.
I agree with Commissioner Cloutier. Wayfinding or simply being able to locate the facility is a necessary component of running a business. The secondary advertising aspect is there as well, but
And finally, the granting of the proposed variation will not be contrary to the general purposes of this chapter as set forth in Section 431 of this chapter, or the criteria for signs in the village as set forth in Section 432 of this chapter. We good there?
Well, that's the factor that I think is not quite satisfied because the size of the signs proposed, I think, are not harmonious with the building and with the village. So to that extent, I think it's at 432, to that extent, and that limited amount, I think that G is not satisfied.
As the signs are in the application. But
Right,
it sounds
right,
like
as applied, right, as requested, that I think their size is a bit too large. And it could also, I mean, if they were changed also to flat signs with perhaps more of the gooseneck lighting, maybe for the rear one, but that's not as critical to me as just simply the size of the signs.
Further discussion of any of these standards? Which we can entertain a motion and then come back to them to see if they're met.
On the way to creating a motion, I think I'd be looking at 43-2 and also looking at Mr. Potts's suggestion that the entryway sign, as I'm calling it, sign number 1, could be reduced in size. And then it would be more in harmony with the wording of 43-2.
I think most of us are in agreement with a smaller parking lot sign.
Yes.
May I make a motion? Or
Please.
shall I?
Please.
I move that we recommend approval of the variation for the parking lot sign, for the location of the parking lot sign, as well as the rear wall sign, and that we recommend disapproval of the variation for size. So the condition would be that they meet the size requirement of 40 square feet total.
Or at least get closer, significantly closer.
They should be able to meet it, in my opinion.
Fair enough.
So for clarity, you're recommending, making a motion that we recommend approval of variation from 4314B, which is about signs not facing the street, and recommending denial of the variation from Table 2, which restricts the signs to a total of 40 square feet.
Correct.
Second.
Any further discussion on that? More conditions, or conditions, period? Mr. Hannon?
I'm still struggling with, is this more appropriately addressed in a proposed text amendment? Understand that we don't have the same volume of situations that we had with the gas stations, but we're trending towards our rear-facing towards the railroad signs permitted in this district is what this discussion seems to be leading towards. And I'd rather have that in a text amendment as opposed to every property owner coming to us with this same story that we want people from the train to be able to find us.
So
And
would
to
you do
me-
that in a similar fashion then and say that you're approving it with the understanding that we will be moving towards a text amendment to the sign code as soon as possible to address this issue?
That would be my proposal, yes.
So still move forward with this variance, let the board, well, I mean, it's up to the board whether they want to approve it or not, irregardless, but your recommendation would be with the understanding that a text amendment would follow, so we wouldn't be getting more variations of this kind.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, do we want to recommend consideration of a text amendment as soon as possible, or is simply part of this overall look at the B1 sign, the B1 portion of the sign code? This should be one element that's wrapped into that review.
We can always
If
ask the
that's
board on
coming
direction on
soon,
how they
yeah.
want to do that. So if they want us to
Okay.
tackle the whole kit and caboodle, or just get this part done as quickly as possible, with the understanding that in the near future, we'll start tackling
Okay, that's
the
fine.
B1.
I just I wouldn't want to
sign.
make extra work for anyone, because it doesn't seem like this is probably going to be an urgent matter.
Right.
And they have probably prioritized other things for us. So, the mo-
One other comment. So if we went ahead and approved the motion as presented, is there any concern about how the business would choose to distribute their square footage on the side versus the back? Like, is there any concerns from the other commissioners about how big the rear-facing sign toward the tracks could be, given, you know, how they choose to split their square footage of signage?
Without speaking for the petitioner, my guess, based on his previous statements, is that they would be looking at reducing the size of the entry sign from its 36 feet to something less than that, probably around 22, because they already have a design sign for the railroad side. I mean, I'm guessing and suggesting that the size distribution be evenly split or close to it.
What do you mean the two signs should be about the same size?
The LED sign for the railroad side is currently
18.
designed at 18.2 feet. The entryway sign facing the parking lot is currently at 36, and Mr. Potts has suggested that that could be reduced, or they would consider it. And my thought, based on his statements, is that that's where the reduction would be.
So the 18, you're okay with an 18 square foot sign on
Yes.
the south side of the building?
Yes.
Facing the tracks?
So then let's go back to standard E, the unique circumstances or unusual conditions applying to the specific property and sign do not apply generally to other properties and signs in the village. Is that standard met if there's a possibility of signs facing the track? There were thoughts earlier, if I understood correctly, that the one facing the parking lot did and the one facing the tracks did not.
Well, I guess I would ask, how is this any different than the canopy sign where we had the same situation and still found it possible to approve the signage or approve the variation based on the fact that we felt that a text amendment was necessary. Whether it was urgent or not, I'm not sure is as relevant as the fact that we believe that it's necessary or appropriate.
I think in that case, we rationalized that there were 3 gas stations in Riverside and no drive-throughs, at least restaurant drive-throughs. Is that your recollection?
And then there was also, I think, that they previously had signage on it. They just couldn't replace it with their branding change because the code no longer allowed for that type of signage. So in that case, they had signage and they would have to lose that signage because of the branding change from Marathon to Citgo. I think was another one of the factors that the commission took in as they were having that discussion was, they would be losing signage that they had already had.
I guess I would have to say that the unique condition in this situation is that they're requesting something that we feel is appropriate, but is only not allowed because we've not been able to make a text amendment.
For me, I think is that it does not apply generally to other properties and signs in the village. I think most businesses in the village do not face the same situation. So for me, I think, we're talking about E, I think that's met sufficiently.
I'm also concerned a little bit that if we choose to wait until the amendment, then we're just going to end up with a larger side sign. Whereas if we allow both signs and restrict the total to 40 feet, then we'll end up with 2 signs that we feel are more appropriately sized.
Commissioner Miller, are you comfortable with what might be a smaller size sign facing the parking lot? Is that harmonious?
Yes, I think a smaller, so you're asking, would a smaller sign facing the parking lot that is smaller than what they have, would that be appropriate? Yes. I think, I mean, I looked, I think 15% smaller perhaps, 20%, something like that, it would be more harmonious. Not something that fills that entire space above the doorway, basically.
Okay. Other thoughts? So we have a motion on the table.
Does the motion include the suggestion for the text amendment or not?
Do we have a motion to amend the motion to add that condition?
I will make that motion.
I'll second, if it's allowed. Second.
Okay. All right.
All right, call the roll, please.
All righty. Commissioner Pelletier?
Aye.
Commissioner Scanlon? Commissioner Hannan?
Yes.
Commissioner Marhold?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
Chairperson Mateo?
No.
Motion passes.
So we're recommending body. It will go to the village board for their final decision. When do you think?
I think we were planning on having it on the August 2nd agenda. Would that be? Yes, that sounds right. August 2nd. That's a Thursday, so it would be a week from tomorrow.
Same location.
I was trying the whole time to find the sign family, and my phone just doesn't have good connection in here, so sorry.
So, but yeah, you can email that to me when you get a chance, so we can at least provide that information to the board at the meeting, if that's something that your client is amenable to, so.
Thank
Okay.
you. So the reason I voted no, just for information purposes, I said repeatedly that I'm not in favor of rear-facing signs, and voting yes would have been not consistent with that, so.
Did you give me down for an abstention?
I put you down for abstention, yes.
Thank you.
You put that out
I
there.
want evidence that I was
ahead of
here
time.
at least.
Yes.
Chairperson Mateo, thank you for the explanation.
I like that being part of the record. Why did she vote no? We have no old business, we have no new business. Our next meeting is August 22nd. Do we have any information for it?
I don't have anything yet. I believe we may have to have a public hearing on small cells. So I'm waiting for some clarification from Michael Mars, because we did just have to pass a municipal code amendment in regards to small cells based on some state legislation that was passed. So I believe there's some modifications that need to be made to the zoning code as well in regards to wireless facilities, cell towers, and now the new small cells that are more what the telecom companies are doing. So
Could you define what a small cell would look like?
that is more the ones that they're doing on like utility poles. So they're like those smaller antennas versus the large cell towers and the bigger ones they're putting up there. So this is kind of part of my understanding of the 5G network that they're trying to roll out, utilizes these smaller cells dispersed throughout the communities and service areas versus just doing the large towers way up in the sky. So there was some change, state regulations that were changed that basically said you can't hold small cells to the same requirements you did to cell towers. So, so some of those things can't be necessarily special uses anymore, which is kind of how we had the code before. So that might be on our next agenda as a public hearing text amendment to make those changes that were required to make by state statute, new regulations. And then we'll have hopefully some continued discussion on awning stoop entries, porches, definitions, see if we're ready for a public hearing for that stuff. So,
Would there be a petition for that hearing? Would it be the village?
It'd be the village, yeah.
Okay, all right.
There's a good article in the Landmark about wireless facilities.
I read that also.
So yeah, in addition to, you know, basically having to allow them in our right-of-way on utility poles.
Or they could put a new pole up, right?
Put a new pole up.
Which just seems astonishing. I mean, the way it sounds, it's like they could put it on,
In your parkway.
yeah, in our parkway, you know, any parkway, along any parkway on any street.
So I think we have
Residential
some
street.
control over that in that our parkways are considered part of our landmark district. It's part of our designation. So hopefully we can have a little bit more regulation and be able to say, no, that's not a good location, but maybe somewhere over here would be better. You know, and they'll have to kind of work on that give and take so that we're, you know, not putting a pole right in the middle of Guthrie Park or something, you know, so.
That's
that kind of thing.
because the way the article was written was very worrisome concerning Riverside.
Oh yeah, I was very worried through the whole thing, and I probably had some choice words when I heard that it got passed. However, work with what we can, and there's some. Michael believes we have some design guideline kind of thing that we can be able to put together and enforce. And you know, we might not be able to say no, you can't have any poles altogether, but we can say this is not an appropriate location for one because of our landmark designation and its chosen location. So hopefully we'll be able to kind of put that all together in a package and kind of get out ahead of things. But this is all kind of rolling out effective August 1st, so we need to get moving on the zoning code regulation portion of it.
So preservation meets in August, so they would see it first.
If we have things together in time for that, yes.
Great. Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion since I didn't speak too much tonight.
I'll second the motion to
All
adjourn.
in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.